Hello and welcome to today's live chat, which is coming to you from Heilbronn. I haven't done a live now for about 5 weeks. This is due to the fact that I had to take care of the day job, and but I'll try and do more as and when is possible. I usually have meetings, having said that, in the evening, and so it's not always possible for me to do the lives which I was able to do in the summer relatively successfully. Heilbronn, for those who don't know, is located approximately 40 kilometers or so to the north of Stuttgart, and so I'm here at present. Probably be here for a couple of weeks. Even longer than maybe a month or so. Hello, Annie. So anyway, in today's video, I wanted to talk about a letter which was found in the Vatican archives last week, or at least it was announced in Corriere della Sera last week, the Italian newspaper. And I put a link, when I announced I was going to do this yesterday, I put a link to the article in Corriere della Sera, so that people can actually read it. Of course, I'm assuming you can read Italian, and I do appreciate that not everybody can actually read it. Incidentally, when I opened the site I've got in front of me right now, you can actually hear it as well, which I thought that was a really good thing. So in this letter, which was found in the archives, is yet more proof that the Holocaust was actually known about by the Vatican itself. It does need, of course, to be pointed out immediately from the very start that the Pope was not the recipient of the letter. So one assumes that he might have been informed about it, but there's no proof that he was. Now, anyway, so the letter's dated the 14th December 1942, and it's a letter that was sent from a German priest to the Vatican itself. And in this letter, the priest states the following: that he'd been to a place called Rava Ruska. Now, if you look at a map you will see that there is Belzec, where the death camp was. Then you come south towards Lviv today, or Lemberg, as it was called in German, and then you pass through Rava Ruskaya. And so now trains which went from the area of Galicia. Galicia was part of the general government. It became, in the summer of 1941, it became part of the general government. It made up approximately almost 40%. It was the largest part of the general government. So the other states, the other provinces of the general government being Radom, Warsaw, Lublin, and Krakow. So the Galicia was the biggest single part of the general government, and the way that the Nazis murdered people was largely done by geographical administrative areas. So therefore, for example, people in southern what was Poland, place like Czestochowa, would be taken to Treblinka to be murdered, passing trains coming the other way from places like Płock, for example, who were murdered at Auschwitz, because this is the way they organize things. So the people from Galicia were murdered largely in Belzec, although they were actually shot en masse as well. So the Jewish population, good morning, the Jewish population of Lviv, for example, was murdered in Belzec. And in fact, we've got two people who escaped from Belzec, and one of them was called Rudolf Raeder. He was then 62 at the time of his escape. He was a chemist, or he had been a chemist. He knew how to make soap, and he was taken to Lviv from Belzec, the death camp, and he had to help load some things onto a lorry. and there was 5 SS people with him. One was left there to guard him, but he went to sleep. When he went to sleep, Rudolf escaped. The other 4 went out for a night on the town. And Rudolf Raider, he went round to his former landlady's property. The landlady hid him, and that's how he managed to survive the war. And he later, after the war, he went to Canada. Now you can read his account of what happened at Belzec, and so this is one of the. I think it's the best account, in fact, what happened in the camp itself, and it's the only thing which has been written by an inmate. Somebody was there. 432,000 people were murdered in Belzec between March and December of 1942. We know the number exactly because it was found. It is a radio message, and in the British archive in Kew, National Archives in Kew. So that we know absolutely. Now, to come to this message, what the messages said, that 6,000 people were being murdered. I shall read this to you. Unfortunately, this the letter was in German. The Corriere della Sera is in Italian, and now I'm translating it into English, so things are going to get lost in translation a bit. So anyway, so they refer to the author of the letter refers to an altoforno. An altoforno in Italian is a blast furnace. It's a we're using the metallurgical industry. So it means more than a crematorium. And every day, up to 6,000 people, above all Poles and Jews, were being killed there. Now, we know that that many people were not being killed every day. But, I mean, as I said, 432,000 people were killed there. 6,000 people going through Rava Ruska. Now, in Rava Ruska, the Jewish population, if my memory serves me correctly, was about 5,000 people. But I think he's referring here to people actually going through. We don't have the letter, unfortunately. We can't see that that hasn't been yet released, or at least if it has been released, I haven't seen it. So we've got these people who are going through Rava Ruskaya. This person's, this German priest has seen it, and he sent a message to the Pope. And so now it needs to be pointed out, I did a video some time ago about an article which appeared in a newspaper in Tasmania referring to the Holocaust. Now, now obviously, I did this because it was the other side of the world, so I've got to make that quite clear. But it was a bit, in my part, obviously the Tasmanian newspaper didn't have reporters in occupied Poland, but and was referring to other sources. So perhaps it was a bit ingenuous of me to actually use the Tasmanian, but I think I made the point that the message got that far. Now the this is yet further proof. Now, it needs to be pointed out that this operation may have had the highest security classification in the Third Reich. It was the RS security classification. It was top secret, but something like this doesn't go without being noticed. Not only that, I mean, putting Jews in ghettos was not a top secret. Just the murder operation was itself. And so the idea that keep something like this from the population is in itself quite absurd. But not only that, it affected people in the death camps themselves. Now, some of you may be aware that I actually lived with a person who escaped from Sobibor, Toiva Blatt, and he's well, he told me, but I mean he also said this in his book, that they were in the death camp itself, but they tried to hide from the people in the sort of the living area of the death camp, that people were being murdered in the death camp, the death part of the death camp. They weren't allowed to discuss it, even though everybody, of course, actually knew about it. And this you can also sort of read in other accounts, such as Samuel Willenberg, who was in Treblinka, and he escaped from there. So the idea of trying to hide what was going on, which was absolutely obvious because they were the people in the living part of the camp, were those that actually welcomed the new arrivals who had come there to be killed. They were the ones that carried their stuff out for them, and they were the ones that then cleaned up the trains before they left the death camp, having brought the victims to be killed. So but more the point here is what I wanted to say is to the efforts of the papacy. Why didn't the Pope do anything about it? Now, in his New Year's message on the 31st of December 1942, and about well into it, the Pope Pius, or Pio to use an Italian, the 12th, said the following. He said that he wanted people to remember those who are being persecuted because of their nationality and beliefs, or words to that effect. And but he didn't say directly. He didn't want to introduce the exact form of what was going on. He was the Pope. He could have done something. Why didn't he? Well, you could say, first of all, there's a very good argument. He doesn't represent the Jews, he represents the Catholics. So that's the first number one thing which has to be borne in mind. Now, many Catholics themselves were participating in the killing. So maybe he didn't want to upset them. I don't know. The papacy had been in 1933, the papacy and Nazi Germany had signed a concordat. So it was the first country, I suppose, that I don't know if that's entirely fair to say it was the first country to recognize Nazi Germany, because the others did, but it was the first one to do a deal with them of any importance. And as part of this, the monies were paid to the papacy directly from the German taxpayer. Adolf Hitler paid his church taxes until the end of his life. And so that, I think, is something which needs to be borne in mind. So he was brought up as a pious Catholic. His mother was constantly in the church. Also, I did a video of this. You can see that the church he went to as a child, with his childhood house, and as you can see in the video, the church is the house is just in front of the church. I mean, you've got a very clear view of it. So we've got these factors. Now, one thing he could have done, I suppose, logically, was he could have excommunicated. Now, an excommunication is not going to have much effect unless you really believe that it's going to have an effect. Had people been excommunicated, they had no problems excommunicating people who in the past. So, for political reasons, could they have done this? Could they have done it in this case? And I would argue that is a possibility. The excuses which have been put out by the Pope, that he didn't want to make things worse, and now this is often used as an excuse, but you've got to then say, well, how much worse could it have got? You've got here the Nazis are trying to murder all the Jews in Europe. So now, can you please define for me what could be worse than that? I don't follow that argument at all. What it might have been is made it worse for him, but at the same time, we also have to bear in mind he represented the Catholics, and maybe an argument would be that that the Catholic Church would be attacked somehow by the Nazis if he stood out and did anything. Now, the Nazism was born largely in Bavaria, and all of the early Nazis were Catholics, and just about all of the camp commandants and a large percentage of the staff were also Catholics. So who voted for Nazis in Germany in the 1930 in the 20s and 30s. It wasn't Catholics, and this is the thing. When you look at the sort of the typical Nazi voter, they are they're Protestant, they are sort of middle class, they're from small towns. This is the sort of thing. That they were. Not only that, it is in Germany itself that it was the Catholic Church that showed itself to be far more resistant. And as John has just pointed out here, it was the Catholic Bishop of Munster who put a stop to the T4. I'd say that slightly differently. He tried to put a stop to it. The T4 killings. The last person to be killed was in... was the date? May 1945? Was it June 1945? They continued even after the area was liberated by the Americans. So the T4 didn't actually conclude until it outlived Hitler. So the killing of life unworthy of life, to use the Nazi phrase. Anyway, so I think that these things need to be in mind. Another thing which comes after the war is you've got the rat line. Well, effectively there were two rat lines. There was a northern rat line, which Himmler attempted to use, or Ohlendorf, for example, attempted to use. But most best known is the southern rat line. And the southern rat line was largely it was the Catholic Church which was responsible for providing assistance to these Nazis who escaped. Not everybody, because I read somewhere that Mengele, he was a Catholic, but he wasn't aided, as far as I can tell, and I prepared a rather long dissertation on Mengele, which has been sort of sitting on my computer now for 4 years, but how he escaped. And Mengele was it was the wealth of his family. His family is very wealthy. You can still see Mengele farming equipment lying around. In fact, I can't remember if I published this or I didn't, but today, where the Mengele plant is in central Günzburg, there's a big shopping center there. And but anyway, so it was a family concern, a family very wealthy. The Mengele agricultural company has been, I think it's Linde from either Netherlands or from Belgium. I think it's Netherlands, who is the company which owns it, and they stopped branding it Mengele some years ago. But you do occasionally see them in the fields, the Mengele equipment. So anyway, sorry to come back to this article in Corriere della Sera. It was also reprinted in others as well. And anyway, sorry, just make John's point here, that which is good, because the Catholic Bishop of Munster did speak out against T4. Yes, absolutely, no doubt about that. And there were other priests as well who actually did speak out against these things. Of both evangelical as well as Catholic. There was another church which became called German Christians, which was entirely Nazi. It was, in fact, they wanted to get rid of the New Testament and replace it with Mein Kampf, for example. Hello, David. And John mentions that I think this is what he means, is that the family disowned, the Mengele family disowned the Mengele from Auschwitz. That is not actually true. They financed him. Indeed, he was actually caught when in 1985 the lawyer's house was raided. I went to the lawyer's house and I filmed it. I mean, just a normal house in the street, so some poor so-and-so could probably get cheesed off about a video I did. But when I get round to putting it together, at least, I've only filmed it in February 2019. But it was the contact. The lawyer was arranging payments. And so it was from that it was found out that the police got paperwork which led them to the house, and then they found out that he'd been killed in he went swimming in the sea and he drowned. So David likes my haircut. Yeah, well, I had it done some time ago. It was in the usual place I go to in Gdansk. Right. Anyway, good. So I think I've just about said everything I can about this. Actually, I'm just having a quick look through this now. The Vatican archive was opened not that long ago, and so it must be great to be. I mean, I was just thinking today, this is the sort of thing I ought to do. I know the language is involved. I reckon I'm relatively good in an archive because I can read through the papers. I know how the archives work in general, and and that was just the sort of thing I ought to be doing. Anyway, I'm not, so I would have liked that. The Pio the 12th, or Pius the 12th, I think we're waiting for his beatification process or something. He wants to make him into a saint. So I've got it here in the Corriere della Sera. So the 2nd of March 2020, the archives were opened. So that was the time of COVID, and so it would have been rather difficult for people to actually get in. But anyway, look, you've got the article there from Corriere della Sera. There's a link below. It's dated the 16th of September and I think that this is it is quite important. It also needs to be pointed out, of course, that the Pope was pretty worried about the occupation. In December of 1942, Italy was still in the war, but by this time it was absolutely clear that Mussolini was getting cold feet. December 42, the German Sixth Army was surrounded at Stalingrad, and actually today I started writing up about the Rosenstrasse protests, and so the first thing I wrote was to situation at the beginning of when these protests happened. The Rosenstrasse protests were the result of what was called a factory action, where Jewish people in Berlin had been sent to work in factories, and so they decided the Nazis decided they were going to round them up and send them to be murdered. And anyway, they were arrested, but the majority people in mixed marriages, and their wives, or occasionally even husbands or other family members, protested, and this protest took place in the center of Berlin from Rosenstrasse. It's not exactly on the main road, but it's almost on the main road that leads to the Alexanderplatz, the name of which I've now forgotten, but it'll come back to me one day. And so that is something which happened at the same time. So it's in December 42. The Pope, which probably had his eyes on the Mediterranean more than Eastern Front, where the Stalingrad debacle was taking place, but the Operation Torch is taking place. The Axis were being crushed into Tunisia, and so he might have felt that the day of liberation was coming closer, and he could have actually maybe done something. It also needs to be pointed out, of course, that lots of Jewish people were able to hide in the Vatican, and the Vatican itself wasn't actually occupied by Hitler effectively. I mean, if you ever go to the Vatican, you can see it's got these buildings, and it's got this big square, and that's it really. but it was possible to get in relatively easily. Right, sorry, so there was a question there for me about if I know Nicholas Frank. I know of him. I bought his book, and I read 3 pages, and I thought it was just totally disgusting. And then I lent it to somebody, and I never got it back. So I bought it in 95, I think it was. No, I was in Gdynia at the time. I'd left Gdynia, but it was 93 I bought it. So it's 30 years ago I bought Nicholas Frank's book. I bought it in Polish. and but I just thought it was. I thought it was a bit horrible, actually. I just didn't like it. I mean, I understand he didn't like his parents, and that's fair enough in the circumstances. Nicholas Frank was the son of the Gauleiter of Krakow, occupied Krakow, the general government, and who was Hans Frank, who was hanged at Nuremberg. Oh, it's been on YouTube recently. Yeah, he has been on YouTube recently. Yeah, no, I've seen several things he's done. For example, I saw an interview. He was on Hard Talk, for example, and he said, "Don't trust us Germans," and I thought that was. This is going back a few years now, actually. That, but I did watch that. Anyway, I hope he's doing all right. I think he's the only surviving son now of his in his family, and I'm not certain of that one. Anyway, good. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you found it interesting. On Friday, I have a video about Salon Kitty. It's my second video on this subject, and that was filmed in Berlin in the first Saturday of July of this year. And I've got lots of other things, actually. So I'm actually now putting together what I did in the summer, and so I'll be going through that. I'll dictate that. And my problem is when I do something with dictating, I need somewhere that's relatively quiet. And to be quite honest, it's hard to find somewhere which is quiet for dictating things. So particularly when you live in a van, it's hard. Mind you, I've got to say this, when I'm at my mother's place, that's even worse. I mean, got all the noises from outside. Which I suppose I could go and take the van somewhere into the middle of nowhere and then just do it there. Okay, thanks for watching. All the best for now. Bye from me. All right, thanks for being here. Thanks, David.